Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my channel. My name is Dr. Cristina Cubillo Santos. And if you're new here, please don't forget to click like and subscribe. Today's guest is Sarah Sadie. And Sarah and I have known each other through our movement background. It's been probably over 8 years that I've known her now. And she has evolved as a teacher, as a human, and why I'm bringing her on today is to speak really about motherhood, pregnancy, and the most important aspect of that is movement through all of the stages of pregnancy and beyond. So Sarah, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
And so, like I said, I want to discuss more about what are some of the benefits of personal practice, whether it's Pilates, yoga, or aerial practice, because you are someone who's versed in all of them, and you've been a teacher for many, many years, and also professionally, you had a dance movement background as well, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. So I just remember I was always inspired by your classes, and you were always a wealth of knowledge. But now at this stage of life, I'm going through motherhood and having 2 children now. Tell me, how has movement inspired your journey through first and second pregnancy? What did you see were some benefits? And we'll just discuss each question separately as we go along.
Sure. I mean, for me, movement is my guiding light to understanding myself. And pregnancy is a radical experience, even if you're blessed to have a quote unquote easy pregnancy. And in light of that, I've always used, as I said, movement to kind of check in with how I'm doing. And you're truly multiplying everything in your body, and your brain is changing. So to negate or ignore a movement practice during pregnancy was not really possible for me. Obviously, if there had been some sort of limiting issue physically where I wasn't allowed to, that I would have considered that. But what I've learned, especially through my second pregnancy, is this quote, allowed to, thank you, this quote, this being allowed to do something is really protect the medical industry sometimes, so that they they're trying to just say yay or nay to movement. And there's often a lot of gray area within that. And that even goes as far as I had C-sections with both children. So I was told to not do any movement until 6 weeks postpartum. I was kind of told you could split the C-section incision. And that is a very scary image.
Yeah.
And so I really listened with my first pregnancy. And then I got a lot of greater information and education during my second pregnancy, knowing that I would have a C-section. And I was moving like 8 days postpartum, and it really helped me, especially with double the children in one day. That's how it goes. To find myself again.
And so you have practiced Pilates, yoga, and aerial during your first pregnancy. Can you tell me a little bit about that journey? How did you feel? And I love that you said that mind-body connection. It's extremely important, listening to our bodies. But as a teacher yourself and someone who's always striving to continue to educate themselves, tell me your experience specifically with the first pregnancy. What were some of the benefits of your practice, and then some of the struggles during and post?
Yeah, I mean, the benefits again were that I didn't put my life on pause in order to create a human. And one way, and it's maybe a little more European than American, that my husband and I have tried to live our lives as new parents. And my daughter's still 2 years old, my oldest, is that we were bringing a baby into our lives instead of making our lives completely about our baby.
I love that.
And so likewise with pregnancy, I was welcoming a baby, a tiny, their size of like a cinnamon grain when you conceive. I was welcoming that into my life, which has always revolved around movement. So the benefit was that I didn't put the pressure to remove myself from my own life that I think we as a society put on moms. Oh, to not work, to not do this, to not look a certain way, to not feel a certain way, because it's all about the baby. I really want to model, especially as a woman, but certainly with my son who's 4 months old, I want to model that I'm a person too, and not solely their mother. And not that isn't abundantly important to me, because it's about the most important thing in the world, but it's also not the only facet of who I am. And I believe there's a lot of pressure to make motherhood encompass our entire life. And while it informs my decisions, it doesn't make all of them.
Yeah.
So the benefit was that I got to still feel like myself and really experience what it's like to change and reorient it around a changing body. The challenges were really second guessing myself based on the information that I had from, probably 15 to 20 teacher trainings I've done over the years. And they sometimes either limited, vague, or very restrictive modifications that are often sort of, one paragraph in a manual that's 200 pages.
Yeah.
It's both not enough. I heard this from a training I took recently. It's both too limiting and not limiting enough the information that we're given. So it was just a lot of feeling like I can either completely listen to someone else, which is not in my nature, and therefore my life will get much smaller for this time, or I can follow my intuition, but coupled with that is some anxiety around, is my intuition guiding me in this new world in the correct way?
Yeah. And so would you say that, let's say, first trimester, right? You're still doing everything as you were doing before, or are you being mindful? You know how they say, oh, try not to do inversions, try, don't be on your belly, whatever the tips are from like a yoga teacher training. What is it that you applied personally in that first trimester stage?
With both pregnancies, and I don't feel like a super fearful person, but I was super anxious with both, even with more education in the second. So the first trimester, I was actually the most cautious. And I wouldn't say I did very little. I was still on my stomach, but I did much less traditional core work, because I really want to honor that time. The baby it's so even hard to call it a baby. You know you're pregnant, but it's a bunch of cells. At 6 weeks, there is the heartbeat, which is incredible. But until you get to that 12th, 13th week, I have, had the privilege of working with so many women over the years, and really have come to understand how common pregnancy loss is. And so for me, I felt maybe the greatest reverence for my body in that first trimester of wanting to let it do its thing. And, I really didn't show it all, and many women don't. Often there's no weight gain, you feel differently, your hormones are certainly changing, but there's not this visible pregnancy. And so it's almost for me like a greater time of kind of incubation.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And then you're moving into the second trimester and you're like, okay, I am seeing certain changes in my body. And so how does that change your approach to the practice?
For me, I kept really focused on how I wanted to feel. And for me, I really just like to feel strong and flexible. And I really, in the method that I've created, Bend Beyond Belief, I use flexibility as the gateway, as the path to strength. I've always had a more flexible than strength inclination. And so that's the language in which I feel most myself. So I would say I really, focused, I'm feeling it even now, on a lot of side body expansion to both open space for me and the baby and to strengthen, because through your final trimester, your third trimester, you can really do a lot of side core work or oblique work. And one thing I learned from Jenny Redford, who's a great resource, she was always urging me to keep the baby close by really engaging deep core work. And that made so much sense to me, and yet had never been shared with a medical professional. So in terms of second trimester, I was focusing a lot on that deep belly breathing, where I was pulling my belly back towards my body, versus, there's significant weight gain, particularly towards the end of the second trimester, definitely the beginning and middle and end of the third. And we can feel like, okay, should I just let this go and let this breathe? But I think there's both a physical and very maternal connection to holding your belly close to your body, which is also, for me, was like a way to keep my energy close versus feeling like it was spilling out of me.
Amazing. That is very useful to know, because like you said, not a lot of people mention that, and certainly you don't hear it in your everyday teacher training. And so then going into the third trimester, obviously the body is changing even more. There's more weight to hold. Have you done aerial inversions? Have you done typical Pilates core work or reformer work? What were some of the practices that you stayed with or maybe introduced in your third trimester?
I would say when I had a private studio in Aspen, it was called Pilates SSN for Sarah Sadie Newett, Pilates Yoga Movement. And I opened that about 5 years ago. And movement was this word I put on there because I've been Pilates and yoga trained for a very long time, over 15 years. But I wanted a word that would encapsulate whatever I needed and whatever my clients needed. Was a private space, which is where I started to work a lot with pregnant women. And as you know, probably from your experience, when you're teaching privately, you're often privy to new information.
Yes.
Where I was sometimes the second person to know about a pregnancy or a pregnancy loss. And so the word movement allowed me the freedom and the space to nurture whatever my own body needed and whatever my clients' bodies needed. And so when I think of the third trimester, to me, I just imagined all the movement was like an added benefit, because you look and feel truly pregnant at that point. And so it felt like, honestly, like like a very cool study in what is possible when we're in a totally new shape. Having been active my whole life, my body has been looking and feeling somewhat similarly for a long time. So to undergo the transformation of pregnancy was really explorative for me. And my first pregnancy, I had access to Reformer and Pilates Cadillac, and I actually played with inversions all the way through the end, which was really fun. I wouldn't necessarily hang back for too long, but I really enjoyed the release in my low back. My second pregnancy, I have been teaching virtually with like a folding chair for a really long time. And at the very end, around like, I think 34 weeks was the last time I did aerial. I was able to go upside down slowly, but the weight gain for me was probably around 25, 28 pounds at that point. Was dramatically difficult to invert with that much weight at the center. I could get there, but there was even one day I think I'd rigged a little bit too high and I could barely even get into the hammock, and then didn't feel like re-rigging, etc. So I would say there's benefits to inverting at that stage, but everything that you do at that point is a bit more effortful. And so economy of movement or economy of energy is greatly understood. And that really follows you through the fourth trimester and beyond. So there's this very interesting thing where you can even, and this happened for me with both pregnancies, lose a little weight at the very end of the pregnancy because the baby's kind of done. I was fortunate enough to carry to 41 weeks with my first and 39 and a half with my second. So you're kind of starting to prepare for a slightly smaller body, not dramatically so, but having just less to carry around, while you're about to have more to carry around in replacing that weight with the baby being on your outside.
Can you tell me, is there any breath work that you found was beneficial for you to prepare for pregnancy itself, even though you went through with a C-section, but still, even if you, in the first pregnancy, maybe you didn't know you were going to do a C-section, what were some preparatory exercises for yourself to say, okay, this is the work that I'm doing to just like feel at ease with the baby coming through?
Yeah, the biggest thing I focused on was that holding the baby close breath. And that's of course on the exhale. So the inhale that really prepared me was to visualize breathing into my entire diaphragm, all 360 of my body, because you can obviously witness your belly move away from you and towards you, but feeling as though I could maybe bring breath into my ribs, side ribs and the back of the rib cage. That was really useful because, and again, you know, I didn't experience this, but many people experience shortness of breath because, you know, the baby is, I saw this really cute cartoon and it showed a baby next to a few organs, and the organ said, "Nice to see you, didn't know you were coming."
Like pressing against, and it's causing that difficulty. Yeah.
It gave me actually a lot of compassion for everything that's next to your uterus where the baby is living, that they know what to do because we're biologically incredible. But there was a lot, you know, right now I have enough room for everything. And then all of a sudden a whole human starts to grow there, and you realize that it's not just how you feel that's reorienting, it's your entire internal systems that have to make room for and provide for your growing baby.
Yeah. So how you mentioned something briefly, you had a short period of time where maybe you didn't do any movement postpartum, right? Such a short period of time. So what did that look like for you? You can speak to both pregnancies.
Yeah, when with my first, which is almost 3 years ago, I just was very diligent and did like nothing, you know. But I will say, and this is not as a compliment to myself, but just as the power of movement, is someone came to the house that didn't know me, and she was like, and I was carrying Penelope, and she said, "Where's the mom?" I was like, "It's me." She's like,
"Oh, incredible.
What are you doing up like that?" You know, it was 4 days postpartum. And I just didn't even think anything of it. I will say, and this is, you know, whether it's completely my own experience or the process of all the movement I did, and everyone can be different. I just have to share that. Absolutely. I felt like no pain postpartum with my first baby. And I had a very emergency C-section after 5 days of 5 days of labor, 3 days of really active labor. Wow. So I was maybe just euphoric to be done with all of that. But that was my experience of, you know, many people say that C-sections, which is counterintuitive, are more challenging than vaginal births. But my recovery was great. And I really credit a lot of that belly breath and staying connected to my core. The second pregnancy, because I had so much more education around no movement doesn't necessarily mean that I can't reach my arms up, that I can't side bend. Actually, a lot of the things that I do that are more foundational or functional movement based, those are open to you. Doing a full wheel post C-section would be very ill-advised, and I support that that's not advised. But there's, again, what's this gray area of not being able to move? So I think it's on my Instagram. I was 8 days postpartum, and I brought out my TheraBand to open my chest and do things that just made me feel like me, so that I could be the mom I want to be for, obviously a very needy newborn, but also a very coming to terms with not being the only child toddler. There's the difference to me from 1 to 2 children was very dramatic. And so making space for me in order to create enough space for both children is something I continue to work on, and I'm sure will be my work for a long time. But yes, the answer is postpartum with my second, and the first 3 days postpartum for me with the second were much more physically taxing. I would cry when I went to put my feet on the floor from the hospital bed. And so I had a very similar pregnancy, 2 years older, but not dramatically older, and no major difference that I can state. And it was really hard. The next day, the 4th day, I felt much more like myself, but there were some really dark moments initially, which goes to show that you can do the exact same things and still have a different experience. And I don't want to say I wish I'd known that, but I wish I'd been open to the fact that it wouldn't be exactly the same. It might have surprised me less.
Yeah. And in your work, you work with private clients, and you do recordings of classes as well. So when you work with clients privately, and you've expressed that your work kind of revolves now working more with pregnant women, right? What are some of the things that you're noticing when you're working with other people's bodies going through pregnancies? Everyone is different, of course, but what are some things that you're noticing, maybe the biggest fears that women experience as they're doing movement one-on-one?
I think, it's kind of a bit of like a buzzword now is diastasis recti.
Yes.
The separation of the abs. That was something that, my mother's generation, she's 60, did not know about. My mother did crunches, like 3,000 crunches a day through her pregnancy. Like she just loved it. She did it immediately postpartum after C-sections. And so this is the funny thing about education is that we are looking, and I think that's to tie it into what pregnant women are looking for, is it's an unsafe feeling time, because while 2 people create a baby, the responsibility is put on the woman to, from conception, be a vessel that cares for, that nourishes the baby, and then delivers the baby, and with whatever everyone's personal views are on breastfeeding, potentially nourishes that baby. It's kind of it's a pretty lopsided equation. My husband just brought me coffee. That's what I was looking at. So there's a ton of ways that you can be supported with your partner, or if you're choosing to be a single parent, and build in support. But I think given all of that, my clients who are pregnant are really looking for support they need to know what to do physically, and to be nurtured as they are, because so much of their resources consciously and unconsciously are in nourishing their baby.
Yeah, and we forget how to do that for ourselves, right?
And we kind of don't even know.
Yeah, because it's like, okay, speak to your medical professional, but they don't have years of training in movement. Oh, ask your yoga teacher. Well, talk to your Pilates. So it's like a circle back and forth, and you're like, who do I ask? I don't know. Let me Google it, right?
Right. And the thing about Google is that you can find an article or a website to support anything that you want. You can, and I think that there, again, this going back to the mind body connection, we often hear listen to your body. But in terms of preparing for pregnancy, whether you're doing it for years or months or, kind of your whole life, we often wait until we're pregnant to be like, what should I be doing? And what I would say is start to learn what makes your body feel good right now when your primary job is to care for yourself. Because it's very complicated to add a baby and then, whether you're caring completely for the baby or organizing care for the baby, you have to start orchestrating and organizing a lot of other people. So if you can start to tap into what makes you feel good, from the foods you eat, to the movement that you do, to the products that you use. I got very granular as I can in my first pregnancy with, should I use this product? Should I use that? And it's not 100%, but I started to just switch over to clean products across the board. And I don't drink, so that was really easy, that I didn't have to think of not drinking.
Yeah.
So the mother that you want to be does not need to be separate of who you are. It's not like I have the baby and then I become this different person. Motherhood in my mind really begins when you are starting to think of conceiving and wanting to, because it may take you a moment, and it may take you many, and it may take you years. And all of that time, when you look at your baby, however they come to be, will be a reflection of the time and space that you held and created for them before you ever held them in your arms.
Absolutely. Now, you, like I said, you work with clients privately, right? Is this online, right? You are offering online sessions?
I'm currently 100% virtual.
Amazing. So what is a typical session? For instance, do you like to start working with women even before they conceive, so you can kind of guide them in what you already said, creating that connection to themselves first? Because maybe people don't know how to connect to themselves. What does that mean? Is it certain maybe meditation practices, mindfulness practices that you also utilize in your work? How do you like to approach working with your clients when you're working with them one-on-one?
I call them connection questions. So I get very skillful on my end about posing one question, and then I gauge where students are at from there. So I may say, how are you feeling in your body today? It's a big one. It sounds generic. And if someone is really in tune with their body, they might give me an answer that gives me a ton of intel to then design our session. And if someone says to me, I'm fine, then I realize we don't, that's great information for me too, because it's not, fine is not a feeling. And then I know that much like learning to do a bridge or a plank, we need to gain some tools and some confidence around hearing and answering that question, which means confronting how our body is feeling. And that is a very unfamiliar place for many people. I try to not even use the word workout, because that implies it's all about exertion.
Yeah.
And you know me, you know my practice. I love to move in strong ways, but I find that there's a lot of power when we have a moment in which there's the goal of connecting. There's there's the asking of how the body is versus, is my brain just telling me I'm pregnant and I should work out, or I should do this so that I don't have so much weight to lose at the end, or I should do this because on Instagram I saw this mom like breastfeeding and climbing a mountain and like writing a book all at once. The mind dialogue or the mind busyness can pull us away from what does our body need. So many times I've worked with clients before they get pregnant, and many times I've worked with clients who, one client actually was beautiful. I worked with her 1 week, and then the second week, this is where the questions are so important. I said, how are you? Is there anything like new or different I should know for today? And she was like, I'm pregnant. So it was the second time I'd met her, and I was, the second or third person to know that she was pregnant. And in addition to that being like so beautiful, there's fear, there's excitement, there's a lot of questions. My daughter was only like 6 months at the time, so I did not have years and years of experience being a mother, but I had gone through a pregnancy, and that just I think was able to put her at ease.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that a lot of the knowledge that we need when it comes to working with pregnant women is not found in books, or websites or webinars or trainings. It's about not viewing a pregnant woman as any different than a regular woman.
Exactly.
And what does a regular woman or regular human want to feel? Connection, safety, confidence in what they're about to do.
Yeah.
So we can back up all of that connection and safety and confidence with more, academic knowledge, but checking in and really asking and educating someone on the experience of seeing how they're feeling, that they may need a slower pace session, or they may feel like, actually, I'm feeling like, my old self. Can we work hard today? What would that look like? And then just something that comes up a lot is you're told to not lay on your back, particularly in second and third trimester.
Yeah.
And that's often the pressure that can go on the vena cava, or that you could have shortness of breath. Yeah. And something I learned from Jenny Redford, who taught me about the belly breath, is, but if you lay on your back and you don't feel that, then you can lay on your back.
Right. Just feel it in your own body. Exactly.
And that to me was like, oh, how amazing. Like my body might respond differently. It could also mean that in your first trimester, for some reason, you can't breathe on your back. So
roll over.
Roll over. Have someone help you if you're afraid. Pregnancy is this phenomenal experience of being frustrated until you learn to ask for what you need and to listen for what you need, so that you can do that when you have your baby. Because no one really knows what you need in life, right? My husband always says, I'm not a mind reader. And so the practice of being pregnant, or the process of being pregnant, is, in my mind, many times about learning to ask yourself, what do I need? And can I do that for myself? Or who do I need to go to for that support?
Yeah, I love that. And that goes across the board in life, even when you're not going through pregnancy, because so many of us don't know how to ask for help, don't know what our real needs are. I was just talking about that yesterday. And I think you've been exposed to the work of Marshall Rosenberg as well, the nonviolent communication, right? So nonviolent communication with ourselves, understanding our own needs, and then of course, sharing that with others, having those dialogues to be able to feel supported in all stages of life.
Yeah, it makes me think of a student I'm working with now, talked about an acting teacher she had that said, things aren't good or bad, they're just true or untrue. And I think particularly women, and particularly in pregnancy, like, I feel this, is it good or bad? And when we can pull back, and this is largely based in the body neutrality movement, which is not to say that my body is beautiful and it's amazing all the time. You may feel that, but really hoping to just accept how you're feeling. And that acceptance means that we can accept the truth as it's showing up and handle it, versus slightly acknowledging the truth and trying to change it so that we can accept ourselves. I think being open to accepting how we're feeling it's a way of grooming your own intuition when your children won't have a pulse on what's best for them or what's true or untrue. And when you exhibit that you know how to connect with yourself, that is had sent down into the DNA of your child. They witness that in your home. And I think that a piece of all of us when we become parents is hoping to heal some of our own childhood wounds and make it a little bit better or a little bit more energetically clean. And I know that when I empower myself, when I help my clients to empower themselves, it's going to have an effect on the next generation. And that's a really big deal.
Absolutely. So tell me a little bit about your method. Is it a certain amount of time that you're working with clients? Is it like a container of a specific amount of months, or how does that look like? And then tell us where people can find you in the online space.
Oh, thank you. So my method is called Bend Beyond Belief. And there are many ways in which you can work with me. My background is largely in private work, and those can be, I require a 3-month container to begin, because I'm interested in cultivating relationships with my clients and giving them the tools, with whether they work with me for 3 months or sometimes it's upwards of 10 years that I work with clients, that they have a toolkit which they can lean on to feel good no matter what. Pregnancy, loss, movement, changes, everything. And then I also have a 10-week flexibility transformation container, and that's a small group program limited to 10 students. Cool. And it's a really fun program. We focus on a more advanced flexibility pose each week. There's a master class, and we break down chest stand and wheel and splits, and there's a weekly movement plan that goes along with that. So pre-recorded classes that I've created all build up to prepare for the master class. And there's a lot of community support and connection there. And then there's the certification course in that method, which is inclusive of the 10-week program. So students in the certification course also participate in the flexibility intensive. So they have that conception of what it feels like to be a student of the work. All of that is supported by a streaming site called SSN Transform, where I lead weekly classes and my signature classes, which are all part of the Bend Beyond Belief method. And those are flow, which is largely foundational movement, help design you feel, move, and live better within 25 minutes. And the Bend classes often break down a larger flexibility pose or a theme. It could be side body opening, hip opening. Sometimes we work neck and shoulders. And a lot of that's based on, same way I work with pregnant women, I ask my clients how they're doing and what they need. And that's the biggest component of the method, is it's student and client driven. And so those videos that I stream weekly, those go onto my streaming site, where there's about 100 of each kind of class.
Amazing.
Yeah, so my website is sarahsadienewett.com, and that's where you can find information on all of my programs. And ssntransform.com is the subscription site where you can gain access to the large library and also sign up for the weekly classes, which are included in the membership.
That sounds amazing. I love all of that. And you're also on Instagram, right?
Yes, under Sarah Sadie Newett. So easy enough to find me.
Awesome. And I'll include all of that in the description box below so people can reach out to you directly.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge with the audience today. And I think just breaking down some myths of, people that are pregnant feeling like maybe they can't continue their movement practice if they already have a strong practice, or if people haven't had a practice, that they can still do it. But it's important to find the right teachers who are knowledgeable, and ideally teachers who have gone through the same process themselves, so they can really understand what is going on in the body on more of that experience level than just the academic level, right? Because we can understand things intellectually, but if we haven't gone through the process ourselves, it's much harder to connect, I feel.
Yeah.
So,
I want to say it's not true, but there's, I remember teaching pregnant women before I had conceived, and it was definitely a lack of education on my part at that time, other than the minimal that there is in most trainings. But I just didn't feel like I've got this, and I'm totally here for you. I'm sure there's trainings out there that could have helped with that, but there is a very specific feeling once you've had 9 months to carry a child, on the information that you can translate to someone else.
Absolutely. Thank you again so much for joining me. It was a pleasure catching up with you, and we'll see you in the online space.
Yes, thank you,
All
Christina.
right.